It was supposed to be revolutionary. A sleek, futuristic, compact car that would show the world General Motors wasn't afraid to innovate. When the Chevrolet Corvair hit the roads in 1960, it looked like nothing else from Detroit. Rear engine, air-cooled, European-style handling. At a time when American cars were all about chrome, fins, and bulk, the Corvair was different. General Motors wanted to fight back against the growing wave of foreign imports, especially the Volkswagen Beetle. But what started as a bold leap into a new era quickly became a cautionary tale about arrogance, engineering shortcuts, and a car that would eventually be remembered as one of the most dangerous vehicles ever sold to the American public. From the outside, the Corvair was a stunner. It was affordable. It was sporty. It felt like the future. But underneath that stylish skin, there was a problem. Actually, several problems. The most infamous was the swing-axle rear suspension, a design choice that would prove catastrophic. You see, most cars use suspension systems that help keep the wheels flat and stable while turning. The Corvair didn't. Its rear wheels would tuck under the car during sharp turns or emergency maneuvers, causing the vehicle to oversteer violently. Imagine driving down a dry road, turning the wheels slightly, and spinning out with no warning. That's what Corvair drivers experienced. And it wasn't just rare. It was happening over and over again. The car would roll. People were getting injured. Some even died. And here's the worst part. GM knew. They had test data. They had internal memos. Engineers raised red flags. But changing the suspension design would cost money, about $15 per car. So the decision was made to push forward, to hope no one would notice, to treat safety as a suggestion, not a requirement. This wasn't a simple oversight. It was a choice, a decision to prioritize cost over lives. But the public wouldn't stay silent for long. In 1965, a young attorney named Ralph Nader dropped a bombshell on the industry with a book that would shake Detroit to its core. Unsafe at Any Speed. The opening chapter? It was all about the Corvair. Nader called it the perfect example of how car companies ignored basic safety in pursuit of profits. His writing was relentless, detailed, and backed by horrifying stories of crashes and lives lost, and America listened. The reaction was explosive. Newspapers picked up the story. Talk shows started asking hard questions. Congress took notice. For the first time, the government began investigating car safety on a national level. General Motors, caught off guard, didn't issue a recall. They didn't issue an apology. They hired private investigators to dig into Ralph Nader's personal life. They followed him, tried to catch him doing something, anything, they could use to discredit him. That backfired. When Nader revealed the surveillance in front of a congressional committee, the country was outraged. GM's top executives were forced to publicly apologize, and the damage to their image was irreversible. By 1965, GM finally redesigned the Corvair's suspension to fix the problem. But by then, it was too late. The headlines had done their damage. Sales plummeted. Consumer trust eroded. The Corvair had gone from a promising new idea to a national symbol of corporate greed and negligence. Production continued for a few more years, but the writing was on the wall. In 1969, Chevrolet pulled the plug. The Corvair quietly disappeared, but its story was just beginning. The fallout from the Corvair scandal went far beyond just one car. It sparked the creation of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the government agency responsible for regulating vehicle safety to this day. Seat belts became mandatory. Crash testing became a federal requirement. Consumer protection laws were passed. And car companies, for the first time, were forced to admit that safety wasn't optional. The auto industry had changed forever. And yet, despite the impact, some still defend the Corvair. They point to the later models as being perfectly safe. They argue that Nader exaggerated the risks. Even a government report years later concluded that the redesigned 1965 Corvair was no more dangerous than any other car of its time. But here's the thing. It's not just about whether the car was fixed. It's about what it revealed. That GM had the chance to make it safe from the start and chose not to. That's what stuck. That's what people remembered. The Corvair became a symbol, a case study in what happens when corporations believe they're untouchable, when image matters more than integrity, when the cost of human life is written off as just another line in a budget spreadsheet. It wasn't just a flawed car, it was a broken system. And yet, strangely, that same Corvair has found a second life in recent years. Collectors love it. Car shows highlight its unique design. Some even call it misunderstood. Maybe it is. Maybe the engineering was ahead of its time. Maybe, if it had come from a smaller company, the story would have been different. But history doesn't forget, and neither should we. Because what happened with the Corvair wasn't just a car problem, it was a trust problem. People trusted GM, they trusted American engineering, and that trust was violated. Not by one bad car, but by a system that allowed profit to outweigh everything else. The Corvair's legacy lives on, not because of its engine placement or its design quirks, but because it forced a reckoning. It put safety on the national stage. It gave power to consumers. It taught America that even the biggest names could be held accountable. And that's a legacy far more powerful than anything that ever came off an assembly line. So the next time you see a Corvair at a classic car show, gleaming under the sun, remember the full story. Remember the lawsuits, the hearings, the families that never got answers. Remember the young man who stood up and told the truth, even when a billion-dollar company tried to silence him. Because that story still matters. Because the truth is, this car didn't just change GM, it changed America. And it all started with a $15 decision.